A wildebeest calf can run with the herd within minutes of being born. A foal stands within the first hour of life. A baby chimp clings to its mother independently from day one. And then there is the human baby, which arrives doing almost nothing. Cannot walk, cannot feed itself, cannot regulate its own body temperature, cannot even hold its own head up. By any measure of animal development, the human newborn is one of the most helpless creatures ever produced by evolution. And yet here you are, which means somewhere back in the deep past, without hospitals, without formula, without pediatricians, ancient human communities figured out how to keep these extraordinarily helpless infants alive. How they did that is one of the most interesting survival stories in our species. The helplessness is not an accident. It is a compromise between two competing evolutionary pressures: the human brain, which is extraordinarily large, and the human pelvis, which narrowed dramatically when ancestors shifted to walking upright approximately 2 million years ago. A narrower pelvis means a narrower birth canal, and a larger brain means a larger skull trying to pass through it. Something had to give. What gave was timing. Human babies are born at a dramatically earlier stage of neurological development than any other primate. A newborn chimp arrives with a brain already at roughly 45% of its adult size. A human newborn arrives at only about 25%. The rest of brain development happens after birth, outside the womb, in the world. The human infant is essentially an externally developing fetus for the first year of life. For an ancient human group living on the savannah with predators and food shortages and no infrastructure at all, this was an enormous ongoing challenge. The first and most important solution was not a tool or a technology. It was other people. Anthropologists call this alloparenting, care of infants by individuals other than the biological mother. In most primate species, infant care is almost exclusively maternal. Human societies show a dramatically different pattern: grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, unrelated women, even men in some societies. All participate actively in caring for infants. Researchers studying the Hadza people of Tanzania found that Hadza grandmothers spend more time foraging and providing food than almost any other adult in the group, and the food goes disproportionately to grandchildren, particularly when the mother is pregnant or nursing a younger infant. This is the grandmother hypothesis: the idea that post-reproductive women are not evolutionary dead ends, but active contributors to the survival of the next generation. Menopause is extremely rare outside of humans and a small number of whale species. A grandmother who stops having her own children and redirects that energy into helping raise grandchildren may contribute more copies of her genes to future generations than one who kept reproducing into old age. Beyond grandmothers, the evidence for communal infant care is substantial. Studies show that babies in traditional communities are held or carried by someone essentially continuously for the first year or more of life. Not just by the mother, by a rotating cast of group members. This continuous contact regulates body temperature passively through skin-to-skin contact. It stimulates neurological development still actively happening outside the womb. It provides constant monitoring for signs of illness. And it keeps the infant close enough to feed frequently. Because human breast milk is relatively low in fat and protein compared to many other mammals, which means human infants need to feed 8 to 12 times per day. The solution in ancient societies was not to leave the infant. It was to bring the infant, carried against the body while foraging, while gathering, while doing everything else. And when the mother needed to do something that made carrying difficult, the infant was handed to whoever was available. Sleep was its own particular challenge. For most of human history, infants do not sleep alone in separate rooms. They sleep in contact with their mother or other caregivers. Researchers found that the physiological state of an infant sleeping in contact with a caregiver is measurably different from one sleeping alone. Heart rate, breathing, body temperature, cortisol levels, all show measurable differences. The infant sleeping in contact is operating in a physiological state closer to the regulated environment of the womb. We should not romanticize the ancient environment. Infant mortality in prehistoric populations was brutal. Best estimates suggest somewhere between 30 and 50% of children did not survive to adulthood. What the communal care system did was not eliminate these risks. It reduced them enough that the species survived and grew. Ancient mothers also possessed substantial practical knowledge about which plants helped with fever or pain, about behaviors indicating serious illness, about birth itself passed through generations of women assisting at births. The midwife in some form appears to be one of the oldest human roles. A chimp gives birth alone. A human birth in traditional societies almost universally involves experienced women. The picture that emerges is not of isolated nuclear family units struggling alone. It is of a deeply social species that evolved a whole group approach to infant survival because individual parental care alone was not sufficient for an infant as helpless as the human newborn. The human baby is helpless because the human brain is large. The human brain is large because intelligence paid off across millions of years of evolutionary pressure. But large-brained, helpless infants could only survive because humans simultaneously evolved the most intensive and most broadly distributed infant care system in the primate world. The village did not raise the child as a nice sentiment. The village raised the child because without the village, the child did not survive. That is not a metaphor. That is evolutionary biology. And somewhere in the structure of human social instincts, the pull toward communal care, the impulse to hold an infant, the specific tenderness most humans feel toward babies that do not belong to them, that ancient system is still running. It was built over 2 million years because it worked, and the fact that you exist is the proof.